loves trains. Well, get set for There Goes a Train. We'll learn about trains of all shapes and sizes.
Today we're going to be talking about my favorite childhood topic.
I like trains.
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with trains. Every little boy was.
Oh no, but boys love trains, Mike, you know.
But often by the time you're a little older, you start to distance yourself from the things you loved as a kid. When The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks was first announced, I was 16, and my reaction was entirely negative. Oh, he's on a train now, that's stupid. Although I probably didn't use the word stupid, it was 2009. But my hesitation was not only due to thinking that the train was silly and childish, but more to the fact that it looked to be a direct extension of the previous game. Phantom Hourglass was a hard pill to swallow for young me, because it was the first Zelda game I had ever played that I did not like. Back then, I adored every single Zelda game. The series was essentially woven into my identity, and Phantom Hourglass almost felt like a personal betrayal. And now it looked to be the direction the series was taking for the foreseeable future. I could not have been less interested. I am therefore extremely fortunate that my friend bought me Spirit Tracks as a gift that year, and so my reservations did not inhibit me from experiencing what would turn out to be the best Zelda in years. Spirit Tracks was created by mostly the same team that developed Phantom Hourglass, and it was made relatively quickly, recycling the same engine, controls, interface, graphics, and overall structure of returning to a central dungeon in order to collect a map for one quadrant of the world. The quadrants are even explored in the same order. It borrows countless more little things as well, including heart containers instead of heart pieces, collecting the same kinds of treasures as well as parts to customize and boost the health of your vehicle, the same open floor plan dungeon design with the overly detailed maps, even the opening backstory being told to you by Nico in his little series of sketches. The shadow of Phantom Hourglass looms large over Spirit Tracks, and as such, it is impossible to play and talk about the game without comparing the two. This works out to be an extremely favorable comparison for Spirit Tracks because we get to see how all of these concepts from Phantom Hourglass handle when executed competently in a game that is actually fun to play. But I'm also interested in how Spirit Tracks fares among the other Zelda titles and how it evolves the series as a whole. Spirit Tracks can be better than Phantom Hourglass, that's not a high bar to clear. But is it enough to stand up to the great Zeldas of yore? Does it reignite the spark and bring the soul of the series back? Does it make Zelda great again? Well, there's a character named Alfonso, so no. Woke DEI trash. We will never recover. When I was working on the Phantom Hourglass video, I booted up Spirit Tracks briefly because I needed to capture some footage. It was the first time I had opened the game in almost 8 years. I know this because I loaded the save file and checked the stamp book. And I wish I could describe to you the sensation that swept over me just from the title screen. Keep in mind that by this point I was nearing the end of my video, and so for many dozens of hours my life was consumed by Phantom Hourglass's ugly ocean and hideous soundtrack. And when I opened Spirit Tracks and was immediately hit with this song, I literally closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. It was like being doused in cool water after being stranded in the desert for a month. I basically got emotional from hearing this piece of music. A Zelda game evoked an emotion in me, the way it's supposed to be. This is the We Are So Back song. It is the main theme of Spirit Tracks, and it plays again with a different arrangement upon starting the game. This time it is composed with a pan flute, which is lovely, and overall the soundtrack of the game focuses heavily on wind instruments, making The Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks a certified Themes of Wind game. I love the sound of wind instruments, but more than anything I love when a soundtrack has a distinct style that sets a tone for the media it accompanies. Spirit Tracks is an amazing return to form in this regard. The following songs that play for Aboda Village, The Final Exam, Castle Town, and Hyrule Castle are all excellent. At some point I started keeping a tally of how many consecutive great songs there were to start the game. We surpassed the number of good songs in the entirety of Phantom Hourglass by the 20-minute mark. One thing that was very noticeable to me on this playthrough was the dynamic nature of the music. When you move from the interior of Hyrule Castle to the exterior, the song stays the same, but the instrumentation and sort of fullness of the arrangement changes. The same happens at various other points in the game, especially in the overworld theme when changing speeds on your train. This is not a new phenomenon for the series. It specifically happens in both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, but for whatever reason I paid it extra attention in this game. I think it's simply because the music is so good that I had it on the forefront of my mind constantly while playing. The sheer effort put into this soundtrack does not go unappreciated. After this, we get a really nice rendition of Zelda's theme, then escorting the princess from the castle, which mixes with Zelda's theme once you get outside. Some great cutscene music, Chancellor Cole's theme, which is another highlight. The tally just went on and on. Along the path to the Tower of Spirits, we first hear this game's field theme, which is perfect. It is so catchy and pleasant. That bass line that kicks in, followed by the flute, oh, lovely. And what a far cry from that crappy island theme from the previous game that could only tangentially be considered a song. And like, how did we go from that to this? This is the same composer. I don't understand. My tally finally came to an end with the next song, which is the cave theme. It's nothing special, but this is followed up by Tower of Spirits Lobby and then Tower of Spirits Interior, both of which are instant classics. But then, folks, I don't think you're ready for your soul to be launched from your body as we are hit with the crown jewel of the Spirit Tracks soundtrack. This song feels almost diegetic because the rhythmic chugging of the train itself provides the percussion for the track. If you listen to the version from the soundtrack, you'll notice it sounds cleaner. It even has some sort of snare or triangle that doesn't appear in the in-game version, and yet it doesn't feel complete without the train sound. It took me a little while to find a spot where I could let the song play for an extended period without being interrupted by the enemy theme. And I finally found a loop here in the Snow Realm where once I cleared the enemies and stopped at Beetle Shop to reset the track, the enemies did not reappear and I was able to record the song in its entirety. At some point during the game I began to wonder, is this the best song in the entire Zelda series? At the very least it's worthy of contention, not only for being so catchy and perfectly paced and unequivocally Zelda, but because of the context and what it means for the game. If this song wasn't good, then this game wouldn't be good. An absolutely mammoth portion of Spirit Tracks is spent riding around in the overworld, and although it is fun, the train is not fast and runs the risk of becoming tedious and derailing the entire experience. But the music prevents that from happening. There is no feeling of dread that comes from plotting a long course to the other side of the realm. Once that tune kicks in, everything feels as it should. I believe this song is more important to its game than any Zelda track since the original Overworld theme. When we reach the village of Whittleton, we notice that it has a different theme from Aboda Village, and the same is true for Anauki Village and Papusha Village. Towns are back to having unique themes, and all of them are excellent. The Anauki Village is home to a new race that actually debuted in Phantom Hourglass, but are so inconsequential in that game that I literally forgot to mention them in my video. They're not much more important here, but there is one improvement made for the Anauki and Spirit Tracks that is so crucial that they may as well have been introduced in this game, and that is that their village finally has a unique musical theme. It is a truth universally acknowledged that any race of fantasy creatures in possession of a village must be in want of their own music. Imagine visiting Minish Village and it was just the same music from Hyrule Town. Or imagine not having original themes for Crescent Island, Subrosia, Korok Forest, Dragon Roost Island, Kokiri Forest, Goron City, Zora's Domain, Gerudo Valley, Deku Palace, City in the Sky, the Twilight Realm. There has been only one exception to this ever, and of course it was in Phantom Hourglass. How? How am I still finding new ways in which that game failed? It doesn't seem mathematically possible. Thankfully we have Spirit Tracks to right all these wrongs. Well, most of them. The music that plays for the first dungeon is perfectly serviceable. It's not great or anything, but not bad either. But then it plays again for the second dungeon, and I still remember my spirit sinking in that moment. This is the glaring weakness in the Spirit Tracks soundtrack that I'm not going to dance around. There is not a unique theme for each dungeon. It didn't fix this major flaw from Phantom Hourglass. Instead, we're up from 1 theme to 3, meaning we're back to the Link to the Past standard from 18 years earlier. An improvement, but a hollow one, as this is still beyond disappointing. There are only 6 unique dungeons in this game, and for how expansive the Spirit Tracks soundtrack is, it makes it even more jarring that they couldn't write just 3 more. 3 songs short of basically perfection. Boss themes are also up from 1 to 3, which is a lot more common in the series, but short of the mark in Wind Waker and Twilight Princess of 1 per boss. There's even a mini-boss theme. The previous game did so many things badly that I didn't even notice the lack of mini-bosses, until I got to the one in the first dungeon in this game and was like, what? A mini-boss? I remember these. Do you remember, actual Zelda games? For the first time since the Wind Waker, the playable instrument finally returns in Spirit Tracks in the form of the Spirit Flute. It is used to perform a number of duets with this game's sages, and these are every bit as lovely as the duets between Link and Sheik, especially the final duet, which is performed with Zelda, and all the other sages join in with each of their instruments one by one in a magnificent orchestral scene. The entire finale in particular goes crazy hard with its music. The score here is incredibly dynamic, constantly changing depending on who is on screen and what is happening, mixing in all of the game's leitmotifs such as Zelda's, Burns, Cole's, the Spirit Flute, the Demon Train, even briefly the main Legend of Zelda theme. There's this section that I love where Burns' theme is mixed with Zelda's. The music that plays during the battle against Cole and Malladus atop the Demon Train switches genres entirely. I wouldn't even know how to classify it other than it sounding completely unhinged, which reflects perfectly the personality of Cole and the chaos of the fight. Then during the final battle there's this part where you are protecting Zelda while she builds her power, the music crescendoing as she focuses. If you fail, then the music does a little flourish and then starts over. I failed a lot at this, but I never minded because I like the way the music goes. So when asked the question of how can Spirit Tracks possibly be on such a different level than its predecessor when it recycles so much, the most exemplary answer is far and away in the music. A beautiful and engaging soundtrack changes the entire complexion of the experience. Maybe all of the things I hate about Phantom Hourglass wouldn't have bothered me half as much if the music was good. Maybe the sailing in the dungeons wouldn't be so boring. Maybe I'd actually want to explore and complete side quests. Maybe the Temple of the Ocean King wouldn't be so odious. These are all hypotheticals that become realized in Spirit Tracks, a game with an amazing score that elevates each and every individual moment. It easily joins the upper echelon of Zelda soundtracks. Like Majora's Mask and the Oracle games before it, Spirit Tracks completely reuses the engine from a previous game, but makes a number of noticeable improvements everywhere. The touchscreen controls are even tighter and more responsive than they were in the last game, and I first noticed this with an absolutely microscopic detail. In Phantom Hourglass, whenever you enter a house, or exit a text box or a menu or any loading of some kind, you have to wait a half a second before tapping on an NPC to talk to them. Otherwise, Link will just make a little nudge toward them and you'll have to tap again. This happened all the time and it was extremely easy to find examples of in my footage. And in Spirit Tracks, I noticed immediately that this does not happen anymore. It's obviously an insignificant thing, but I just find it the perfect microcosm of the micro improvements made to the controls. More noticeable improvements come in the form of rolling, which was rehauled into a double tap that is far more reliable and consistent, and in the boomerang, which is now a lot less jumpy with how it pans the camera. The boomerang was already an item that felt great to use, but now it feels even more precise and satisfying. I'm so glad to have another Zelda game that uses these touch controls, so that they weren't just wasted on one game that did everything else wrong. Despite sharing the graphics with Phantom Hourglass, visually Spirit Tracks is a lot more pleasing to look at in every aspect. The boomerang looks a lot better, and the bow as well. Both the in-game models and the UI designs of the items are a lot more snazzy and detailed. And look at the difference in quality between the collection screens. Everything about Spirit Tracks just feels so much more high effort. The environments are more diverse and atmospheric, and the same goes for the dungeons, which are back to having far more distinct visual themes. Another improvement that I love is that all the interiors of buildings and houses look really nice with a lot of extra background detail and superior lighting. Even the environments that are shared between both games look night and day better in Spirit Tracks. One thing about the presentation that annoys me slightly is during the moments such as bosses and cutscenes that utilize both the top and bottom screen, sometimes the gap between screens is accounted for, and sometimes it is not. This was true of Phantom Hourglass as well, but I find it even more noticeable in this game. I don't have a preference for one way or the other, I just find the inconsistency a little distracting. Maybe it was due to something like programming to account for the gap was more complicated and so they didn't feel like doing it all the time. The visual diversity offered by Spirit Tracks also extends to Link and his train. We are able to swap out the traditional green tunic in favor of the far more adorable Engineer's outfit. Now, I am a huge fan of Lobster Shirt, I mean who isn't? But Engineer's outfit Link is the cutest he has ever been. It sounds silly, but I'm not lying when I say it makes the game even more enjoyable to play for me. I'm just a fan of outfit options in games. Often in RPGs, I choose my class or armor strictly based on how good it makes the character look. And I might be imagining this, but I think Link just flat out looks better than he does in Phantom Hourglass. Like, I'm sure it's the same model, but I wonder if it's been touched up. His face and hair look less jagged and stiff, and he overall just looks a lot less hideous. He has a new voice too, which helps him to stand out even more from the previous incarnation. There is a shield upgrade this time in the form of the Shield of Antiquity, but for whatever dumb reason, this is just the wooden shield from the last game. It is technically an improvement since it can't be eaten by like-likes, but come on, at least make it look cooler. I need more out of a shield upgrade than this. If you want it to be Antiquity themed, then just make it the Wind Waker Mirror Shield. I mean, that is the shield that Link would have had when he arrived here. But then again, he starts Phantom Hourglass without any shield, so I guess he must have left it on his boat when it sunk. If I were asked to pick the absolute last design that I would want out of a shield upgrade, it would be the Phantom Hourglass wooden shield. I think it was just a lazy way of recycling an asset and calling it a day. I switched back to the starting shield at some point because the black goes better with the engineer's outfit. The sword upgrade is similarly disappointing. Usually the pulling of the Master Sword is a monumental moment in a Zelda game, often one of the most climactic of the story. But despite the setting of New Hyrule, there is no new Master Sword. Instead, there is the Locomo Sword, which was forged in the fires of Key Largo and Montego. And there is no drama whatsoever with acquiring it. It's just handed to you at some random point. Basically, hey, look at this thing I have. And it's like, what? Who cares? Link's train can be customized too, and no longer are the parts completely randomized. Instead, train cards can now be purchased using treasures, meaning you can save up for whatever set you're interested in. You can also sell treasures and use the money to buy different ones from Beetle or some of the other shops, which will help you get those specific treasures you need for the train car you want. There are 8 different train sets to acquire, and all of these are fun and creative. It's always a really exciting feeling when you purchase a new train car to see how it looks, or hear how it sounds because each locomotive gets a unique whistle. Usually in my past playthroughs of this game I would save up for one specific set that I wanted, which often left me the vast majority of the game in just the default train, but in this playthrough I wanted a lot more visual diversity, and so I just bought every single piece I could afford at the earliest opportunity and mixed and matched them with each other. This was a way more fun method. Saving up for the ultimate golden train is always a considerable option, since unlocking the entire thing feels satisfying, and of course pacing-wise I love the visual element of culmination for the finale. Plus the 8 hearts it grants is useful for the demon train battle. But the regal rings and alchemy stones it requires can also be sold for a combined 10,000 rupees, and with that money you can buy every treasure in every shop you come across and unlock way more of the other train cars instead. Either is a fine option, and choosing a new train set you've never used before provides an excellent boost to the game's replay value. The hefty treasure requirement for these train cars does make them feel very satisfying to unlock, and makes treasures and rupees into a very desirable reward for side quests, but it can often feel too steep, specifically when it comes to the common treasures such as bee larvae and demon fossils. Since the game considers them common, it asks for a ton of them for the train cars, but all this means is that you will end up having to grind for them. I didn't grind them all in one go, but instead every time I passed by Whittleton I made a stop to blow on the leaves for 5 minutes, so it never felt too egregious, but it is tedious. I think the high and mid-tier treasure requirements are fine, but the whole system would have benefited from requiring maybe half as many of the common ones. Treasures can be purchased from shops, which replenish their stock once a day, and that is a real world day. You can also play a daily lottery to try and win treasures. When I was first playing this game, I had a routine every morning before school. I would check my berries and honey trees in Pokemon Platinum, then I would put in Spirit Tracks to check the prizes and deposit postcards. If you are after the second place prize, you can deposit 10 postcards and that usually works. You can win the first place prize with 15, but if it's a Regal Ring, I would deposit all 20. If you win a Regal Ring, I recommend just selling it immediately, since the game still provides you with enough to get the Golden Train without ever having to play postcards. I actually believe that Regal Rings should not have been made winnable from postcards, since they are the grand reward of several hidden stations and other challenges, and postcards cheapen their value. No matter which treasures you acquire, it is important for the enjoyability of the game that you buy the train sets that pique your interest. Since we're going to be spending so much time on the train, you need to like the way it looks. Still another improvement made since Phantom Hourglass is to the combat, with many new creative and higher quality enemy types that appear in more challenging groups. Since mini-bosses are back, they can appear later on as regular enemies, as they do in many Zelda games. Heart containers still appear in chests upon defeating a boss, which continues to befuddle me, and they're still handed out as a collectible in lieu of heart pieces. But this is one of the rare holdovers from Phantom Hourglass that was not improved. The number of minor refinements made by Spirit Tracks is staggering, but it is the major improvements that really impress. The Legend of Zelda games are always designed with the gameplay and core mechanics first, and then the story is created as a way to tie into the gameplay and explain why it plays the way it does. The Zelda team wants a game that takes place out at sea? Well, let's just flood Hyrule, and the rest of the plot can simply arise from that concept. We want a game that takes place on a time loop? Let's have the moon crashing in 3 days, that works. Spirit Tracks continues this with an almost comical level of transparency. We want a game that takes place on a train, where the tracks themselves can materialize to expand into new areas. Well, let's make the train tracks actually magic shackles restraining an ancient evil, and the goal of the game to restore them all. It sounds like a bit of a flimsy foundation for a plot, but the actual events that transpire and the cast of characters more than make up for it. Spirit Tracks takes place 100 years after Wind Waker, in the new land that Link and Tetra had discovered, which they inspiringly named Hyrule. Now I know what you're thinking, but Chide, Tetra didn't discover New Hyrule, the Vikings did. And you'd be partially right. The continent was already inhabited by a tribe called the Lokomo, who got there fast and then they took it slow. Nico, now as an old man, tells the backstory of this land, how the ancient spirits had fought with and imprisoned the Demon King Malladus, and laid the tracks down to act as his shackles. But the tracks are disappearing thanks to a pair of new villains who are working to release Malladus. These villains are called Burn and Coal. This was after rejecting their concept names of Smoke and Doobie. Chancellor Kohl is, of course, named after the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who was often referred to as Berne Kohl. I even found an opinion piece stating that Chancellor Kohl has made a burden out of train travel, which is the exact plot of Spirit Tracks. His companion's name differs depending on your region. In some places he's known as Staven, because here we see him staving off the Demon King. And where I live, he's known as Byrne, named after David Byrne, legendary frontman of Talking Heads. The story begins, as it so often does, with Link embarking to Hyrule Castle to meet with Princess Zelda, so that she can present him with his engineering license. But during the ceremony, she slips him a note asking him to meet with her in secret. She wants to be taken from the castle because she senses evil in the Chancellor. In a nice twist on classic stealth, we have to escort Zelda out of the castle while having her hide from the guards. But on our way to safety, we are ambushed by Cole, who reveals he's actually a demon monster. In his design and mannerisms, Chancellor Cole is reminiscent of Kefka, a gleeful madman who absolutely delights in being evil. He's quick to betray Byrne later in the game once he believes his usefulness has run its course. I like Cole as a villain and the energy he brings. It's a refreshing take on the traditional Zelda bad guy. Unfortunately, he suffers from the same problems as most Zelda villains, the main one being his screen time is entirely lackluster. He only appears in 3 or 4 scenes, and after the opening we don't see him again for what was in my playthrough 12 hours. Which I found particularly egregious, even though it is par for the course for the series. In Ocarina we don't see Ganondorf for the entirety of the Adult Link section, we don't see Zant for the entire Mirror of Twilight segment, we don't see Skull Kid for basically all of Majora's Mask, etc. I think I want to see more of Cole because his strength as a villain is in his personality and mannerisms rather than his threat to the world and impact on the plot. The other issue with Cole is his motivations are vague. Why does he want to revive the Demon King? Well, he's just evil, what more do you want? This is where Byrne comes in. Byrne is a member of the Lokomo tribe tasked with restraining Malladus, and he was promised power but didn't get any. He believes that Malladus is the only way he could be granted the power he longs for, and this provides his motivation for joining with Cole. But Malladus instantly rejects Byrne upon his resurrection, crushing all of Byrne's dreams and causing him to enter a state of self-reflection. He eventually redeems himself by aiding Link and Zelda in their showdown with Malladus, at which point he gets zapped into oblivion. He's a more complex and interesting character than Cole, and that is why his music is somber and understated in contrast to Cole's bombastic overtures. I love to see this sort of complexity in a Zelda villain, and I hope for even more nuanced antagonists in the future. I like these villains for their contrast to each other, and it's also fun having two bad guys at once for the first time in the series. There have been multiple foes before, such as Aghanim and Ganon, Skull Kid and Majora, Zant and Ganondorf, but in all of these instances, it's a case of the more evil entity replacing his puppet, never actually acting together. And the cutscenes involving Byrne and Cole are just fantastic. In fact, all of the story cutscenes are, both exciting and emotional. In this scene, we see Chancellor Cole zap Zelda's spirit right out of her body, intending to use her body as a vessel to house Malladus. Zelda's spirit being released from her body is emblematic of the overall theme of the story. If you don't know what theme is, it's more than just something you write about in your 8th grade book report. A theme is an underlying idea in a story that connects multiple threads within the narrative. In Ocarina of Time, there is the theme of innocence lost. Link loses his entire childhood, the children of the forest lose their protective guardian, other children in the story such as Malon and Ruto are forced to grow up in hardship, and Zelda loses her family and from a young age is made to conceal her identity. In Majora's Mask, the theme of loss and acceptance, and death as a form of healing. Twilight Princess, revenge and sacrifice. Link's Awakening has many themes, so take your pick. Sleep and waking, dreams versus reality, accepting the world as it is presented or daring to question how it can be changed. Terran and most of the other people in Koholint accept the world at face value. It is Marin, the Owl, the Nightmares, and Link, who is you the player, who actually dare to think beyond the boundaries of the island. In Wind Waker, letting the past die and accepting the change of things to come. These two concepts are symbolized in the ocean and the wind respectively, with the ocean representing the drowning of the old ways, and the wind bringing with it hope and the promise of prosperity. I would have liked to see Link in a different outfit at the end of Wind Waker, since in this game the green tunic is a literal relic of the past, which is the complete thematic opposite of this ending. I've never thought of that before, probably because I only ever play the game in Lobster shirt, but I think it would have made for strong visual storytelling. And in Spirit Tracks, we have the theme of liberation. Malladus the Demon King is broken free from his shackles, Byrne lets go of his century-long obsession with gaining power, Cole sheds his human disguise, which he describes as exhausting, and is allowed to be his jubilantly evil self. Link at the end of the game is given the freedom to choose what he wants to do with his life, as Zelda asks him who he would like to be once the battle is over. And finally we have Zelda, liberated from her oppressive confinement, and I'm not just talking about in the castle. Her spirit being released from her body symbolizes her breaking free from the traditional role the series had assigned to her. Zelda for the first time accompanies Link throughout the whole game as his companion, directly involving herself in both action and puzzle solving. Her importance is exemplified in the final boss fight, where she doesn't just shoot light arrows at him, but stands side by side with Link driving his sword into Malladus' skull. For me, this is pure elation. Zelda is my favorite overall character in the franchise, and her evolution across the games has been a joy to behold. In the first game, she was just there to be rescued, with only a hint of competence and having the foresight to shatter the Triforce before being captured. Then in A Link to the Past, she is able to speak telepathically, is knowledgeable about Aghanim and his threat to the sages, and knows the secret passages out of the castle. And obviously it is Ocarina of Time that deserves all the credit for finally developing Zelda into a powerful and competent hero deserving of the Triforce of Wisdom, which set the standard for her character moving forward, with only occasional regressions in the likes of Minish Cap and Phantom Hourglass. But finally, the series' namesake shares the center stage, and her personality fully fleshed out. In fact, she might be my favorite iteration of Zelda so far. Her and Link's chemistry is off the charts, and their scenes together an overload of cuteness. The relationship is framed with a touch of childhood romance, with Link developing an immediate crush. I love this because it adds some nice character for Link and some extra motivation beyond pure heroism. This hug that Zelda gives him once she gets her body back just melts me, and this final shot of them holding hands is a perfect payoff for this relationship that is the soul of the story, and a culmination of every Link and Zelda relationship throughout the series. Just wonderful. As a Zelda fan, New Hyrule is an interesting setting, because so far in the series we've had our Zelda games that take place in Hyrule, with A Link to the Past setting the foundation with Hyrule Castle, Death Mountain, Lake Hylia, Zora's Domain, the Lost Woods, and the desert, which would go on to become Gerudo Desert. And then we have the sort of core Hyrule games with Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and Breath of the Wild that would expand on these areas and really cement Hyrule and its familiar landscapes as a consistent setting for the series. The Minish Cap and Skyward Sword are set in Hyrule, but without most of these familiar locations, but it's safe to assume Minish Cap takes place in just a small portion of the kingdom, and Skyward Sword before its founding. And there are the non-Hyrule games, Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, Oracle of Ages, and Oracle of Seasons, which were free to feature all new locations and landmarks without worry for any consistency. New Hyrule feels like it occupies a space squarely in between these two concepts. Functionally, New Hyrule is essentially a non-Hyrule land like Holodrum and Labrynna. I mean, it literally is a new land entirely. But it also features the same diverse landscapes of Hyrule, the forest, the desert, the mountain, as well as the snowy region that we saw in Twilight Princess and later in Breath of the Wild and Echoes of Wisdom. And you could say the same about Holodrum and the other lands that feature a desert and a mountain and even a Lost Woods. But the difference is that, in spite of King Daphnis saying that this land wouldn't be Hyrule, Link and Tetra still named it Hyrule. What this means is that, over the generations, it's entirely possible that these landscapes could come to be known as the same ones from the past. The Fire Realm could eventually come to be known as Death Mountain, the Sand Realm as the Gerudo Desert. Just as the story of Hyrule and Wind Waker was lost to the ages, eventually after enough time has passed, it could very well be the case that, to the annals of history, New Hyrule and Hyrule become one and the same, which would justify the drastic decision made by the goddesses to flood the land as a way of dealing with Ganondorf. He dies, but Hyrule ultimately survives. These are the kinds of things I think about while riding around blowing on my train whistle. Another of these train thoughts that is probably obvious in hindsight is that since Hyrule alone was able to be flooded and not the entire world, and we are still able to sail off and discover an entire continent, then it stands to reason that Hyrule itself was situated in a great valley. Which checks out, because the opening of Link to the Past states that Hyrule was surrounded by mountains, and you can sort of see this off in the distance in Wind Waker while visiting Hyrule beneath the ocean. I know I'm spending way more time thinking about the interconnectivity of the Zelda mythos than the developers themselves ever did, but this is what we Zelda fans do. You almost wish the official timeline was never published. I think if I were to place any Zelda game on New Hyrule, it would be Four Swords Adventures. Not that I remember the story of this game, but I see that this Hyrule is surrounded by water, so that checks out. But beyond being an interesting lore conduit, New Hyrule is perfectly enjoyable as a setting. It's your quintessential Zelda world. It has all the aesthetic, atmospheric, and musical diversity you'd expect from the series, and come to take for granted prior to the great Phantom Hourglass quality purge of 2007. For the first couple hours at least of Spirit Tracks, I just kept thinking what a breath of fresh air these environments are coming off the last game, especially the forest. In most Zelda games, the forest is my favorite area, and it's not hard to see why. It's because forests are absolutely synonymous with Zelda. They are basically the main visual association of the whole series. So as a Zelda fan since childhood, I simply find the forest environments the most familiar and comforting. And Spirit Tracks, for the 6th time in the series, has a forest temple as its opening dungeon, which, for as much as I champion the shaking of norms, this will probably never bother me because it is so classic. I also like the quaint little lumberjack village of Whittleton, and I spend a lot of time here blowing on the leaves because to my knowledge it's the best place to find treasures. Aboda Village is where the game opens, and I choose to believe it was built on the exact spot where Tetra landed on this continent, because you can still see the pirate ship sails built into Nico's house. In the Snow Realm we have the Inauki Village, and in the Ocean Realm, the little fishing village of Papusha, the first of its kind for the series. We also get this beautiful underwater segment. The Fire Realm sports a purple and red sky, lava pits, and tracks that run at an incline. At a certain point I began to anguish over the lack of a day and night cycle. I can't help but feel that riding the train at night would have been especially atmospheric, provided the accompanying music track was good, of course, and there's no reason to believe it would not have been. I always loved watching the sunrise in Wind Waker, and so it feels disappointing that Spirit Tracks does not provide this opportunity. I would also have liked to see rain, or any sort of dynamic weather like this that could heighten the atmosphere. I understand these things were probably difficult for the DS hardware, but it is telling that even as a DS game, Spirit Tracks is so good that it invites comparison to all the tentpole Zeldas that do feature more atmospheric variety. Unlike Wind Waker, which had the sea and the islands interconnected in one world, Spirit Tracks borrows from Phantom Hourglass in having the overworld vehicle sections and the on-foot sections completely separated. What was once islands are now called stations, which might as well be islands since they are every bit as isolated. Usually the stations are just very small areas, but they can be pretty fun to explore and find secrets in. Besides treasures and rupees, the main thing you are after is stamps, which is a really fun idea for a collectible as it gives the feeling of traveling around the world with your passport, collecting a souvenir from each place you visit. Each stamp gets a unique drawing of the area where it is found. As a collectible, the stamps are necessary for unlocking the engineer's outfit, as well as the hurricane spin, which I can finally show footage of. Unfortunately, the final stamp is found at the very end of the game, and so the hurricane spin will not be all that useful for the main quest, but you can find use for it in the Take 'em All On challenge, which is this game's enemy gauntlet. It's more inconsistent than it looks, the hitboxes don't really match the visuals, and it's easy to bonk into enemies. I do find the small size of the stations to be disappointing, as I miss the feeling of exploring a large area that is not the overworld. I miss scaling a mountain or exploring a great lake or getting lost in a desert. Spirit Tracks doesn't offer these feelings whatsoever. In fact, there's not even an area as large as the Cowell Kingdom in Phantom Hourglass, and it's not like that island was even all that big. There are a handful of hidden stations that can be unlocked, which are generally pretty fun. Usually they are just extra challenges like block puzzles or ice races or what have you that lead to extra treasures. One of them is meant to replicate the Temple of the Ocean King, and to nobody's surprise, I hate this one. One of the floors is covered in bombable blocks, which you can use the roller phantoms to smash, but I just used my bombs because it's faster and less cumbersome. But I used up all my bombs, and then the next floor has more breakable blocks, but they are at such an angle that it is nearly impossible to get the roller phantom to hit. I spent like half an hour here, and that's with save states, trying to get this damn phantom to roll into these blocks. It would have been faster for me to just leave and resupply my bombs. Absolutely ridiculous, though I suppose that's true to form for a Temple of the Ocean King replica.
I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think
When Spirit Tracks was first revealed, most people had the same question. How can the game provide the exploration that the series is known for if it is restricted to rails? Aonuma had the idea originally of being able to lay down the track yourself, which sounds like it could have been really interesting, particularly for people like me who grew up with track building toys like Hot Wheels, slot cars, and wooden train sets. But this idea was scrapped, and the way exploration is handled in the final version is that a set of tracks leading to new areas will appear upon completing main objectives, and tracks leading to hidden stations will appear upon completing side objectives. And it is a noticeably diminished sense of exploration when compared to, say, discovering all the nooks and crannies of the field in Twilight Princess, or exploring all the connected areas in Ocarina. But that doesn't mean the exploration in Spirit Tracks is not fun or satisfying. If anything, it feels like that of the Wind Waker. In this game, you already know that there is one island per square. It's not like you're ever going to happen upon a hidden island. The fun comes from landing on the island to see what can be done there. And unlocking the world in chunks is the same progression formula from many Zelda games like Twilight Princess and Link's Awakening. So while I can understand the perspective of disliking being restricted to predetermined rails, I don't view it as anything negative. Especially for one game. Like if every Zelda game from then on was like this, then obviously I'd be annoyed, but for a single game I like the innovation, and it provides Spirit Tracks with its own unique identity. The only thing that would make this sort of exploration truly unenjoyable would be if driving the train itself was not enjoyable. Aonuma understood this completely. He states that nearly half of the development time of Spirit Tracks was spent on the train and making sure it was fun. And in my opinion, their efforts paid off. It helps that they were starting from an advantaged position, which is that trains themselves are already inherently cool.
there goes the train!
If this game had come out when I was 8 instead of when I was 16, I would have lost my mind. Combining two of my great loves, trains and Zelda, it definitely would have been my favorite game ever. But alas, I was born too early. The only thing trains mean for me as an adult is late for work. Late for my job of moving crap from one plastic container to another plastic container so that my boss's bosses can hoard enough wealth to buy a congressman. But Spirit Tracks offers the opportunity to escape back into a time when trains were wondrous and exciting. And the developers did a lot to capture that feeling, starting with the sound effects, which are perfect and add so much to the experience. Mechanically, the train whistle has a number of functions. It is used to frighten enemies, open warp portals, provoke sand sharks out of the ground, and it must be blown sometimes to keep passengers happy. But to me, the appeal of the whistle is that it is part of the package, of the experience that comes with playing a train conductor. I basically just blow it for the satisfaction. The entire locomotive experience would feel empty without it. It's obvious that the Zelda team understood this intrinsically. The whistle even changes in pitch and intensity depending on how hard you pull it, and the sound itself changes depending on which engine you are using. Here's my ranking of the train whistles. Number 8, Skull Engine. Number 7, Dragon Head Engine. Number 6, Stagecoach Engine. Number 5, Wooden Engine. Number 4, Golden Engine. Number 3, Sweet Engine. Number 2, Spirit Engine. And number 1, Steel Engine. Behind the engine is the cannon, which I believe has more of a homing effect than the one from the previous game, but I could very well just be imagining this. The camera has changed to now turn as your train does, which did not happen with the ship, but it didn't solve the problem I had with the camera in Phantom Hourglass, which is the lack of an option to toggle the camera between following the ship or controlling freely, or locking onto an enemy. Now sometimes you will be firing at an enemy and then your train will turn, so you'll have to readjust your camera. And the insufferable loop of bombing and spinning the camera is every bit as present. The third and fourth train cars are the passenger and freight cars. The main side quests in Spirit Tracks involve transporting various people or objects on your train to another part of the world. Freight includes stuff like ice, which can melt in the sun, or a vase that mustn't be jostled, and all freight takes damage from getting hit by enemies. Passengers expect you to follow all the traffic signs and will chastise you for missing one. Oh, I'm sorry, did I not see the whistle sign while I was busy saving your ungrateful ass from evil mutant snowmen? They have a happiness meter that will go down for every infraction, and if it reaches 0, they will demand to be let off. Wow, even in the middle of the ocean? Have a nice swim home, I guess. Every passenger is such a demanding asshole. They're certainly not singing "Nothing Can Stop Us Now."
There's not a mountain that we can't climb. There's not a river we can't make it over.
Things can get really chaotic when you are lugging both a passenger and freight, trying to juggle multiple deliveries at once and still running into people who want to be driven somewhere, but they have to wait until your current passenger disembarks. I don't see why you can't transfer multiple passengers at once with multiple happiness meters. Then I could be even more efficient and more chaotic with my deliveries. There's certainly enough seating in your passenger car. I believe Byrne is even chilling in there for much of the game. And he never complains about my driving. Model passenger. I would have liked if the different train sets offered unique properties for the individual cars, like how the engine does with the whistle. For example, the different cannons could deal more damage or have more of a homing effect, the passenger cars could hold more people or keep them happier for longer, and the freight cars could keep your cargo more secure. The stop and go switch from Phantom Hourglass has been repurposed into something that actually serves a function, a lever that controls your train's speed and direction. There are 2 forward speeds to choose from. You can shift into the slower speed if you're about to, say, run into a spider, but usually I would rather just plow into the spider than reduce my speed. You need to reduce your speed sometimes to keep your passengers happy, but again, I would usually just not do this. Yo, shut up back there, I ain't slowing down for you. When first embarking on your train, you were able to plot a course like in the previous game, but you are no longer required to stick to it. All drawing a course does in Spirit Tracks is preset all of the track switches, so you don't have to concentrate on switching each one. But if you're so inclined, you can just draw your initial direction and make each turn yourself. You are also able to slam on your brakes in reverse, and have to manually stop at stations now instead of just appearing in them. I can't overstate the difference that just these simple changes make for the feelings of freedom and agency that were so lacking in Phantom Hourglass. Ironically, the game that lets you go anywhere in the sea feels more restrictive than the one that confines you to rails. Even if you've plotted your full route, it often ends up that you'll have to switch the tracks anyway in order to chase something down or to dodge obstacles such as dark trains. Taking a wrong turn or not paying close enough attention will end you in a stressful altercation with the dark train, which I always find pretty fun and exciting. You can slam on your brakes and train reverse to the last track switch while bombing the dark train in order to get to safety, but if you make the wrong decision, you can end up sandwiched with no escape. While driving the train, you need to keep an eye out for rabbits, which are a new collectible. They are hiding behind rocks or barrels and must be caught in a little minigame that I fail at as often as not. Sometimes the rabbit is so fast that capturing it basically feels like luck. If you fail, then you have to stop at a station before the rabbit will reappear. I have gotten all 50 rabbits once before, but I don't have much desire to do so again. The reward is a sword beam, which is fine, and I catch every rabbit I see, but I don't go out of my way to look for them. And there is all the classic stuff you would come to expect from navigating a Zelda world. The Lost Woods that has one correct path, the specific route that must be followed through a blizzard, activating 3 things to make another thing appear. There's a part where you are fleeing from a giant spider in a cave, which is actually from an early Twilight Princess trailer, so it's cool to see that finally realized. Underwater, your bombs are turned into homing torpedoes, but gameplay-wise I find the underwater segment pretty disappointing because it doesn't offer anything all that different. The enemies that attack you on your train are pretty diverse, but bombing enemies is still not the most enjoyable thing overall. I like bombing the traffic signs though and watching them rattle. But overall, most of my time on the train is just spent vibing to the music, looking around at the environment and trying to make sure all my shots look good for this video so I don't have to scrub through a ton of footage to find the most visually interesting bits. At a certain point I did start longing for a faster speed option just to help with the deliveries and began pondering how that might work. First of all, it would have to be a late game unlock so that you still get to appreciate the world instead of just speeding right past it a la the Swift Sail. Maybe it could be a setting exclusive to the Golden Train. It would have to have the cargo such as ice and dark ore spoil faster so as not to trivialize those deliveries. And it would have to have some downsides, such as taking much longer to stop, like a train in real life would. Maybe 10 full seconds just to get down to the second speed option. But overall it's not a big deal, and I don't think the game is worse for not including this. The key as always is to keep things spread out. Don't jam all your deliveries into one session because then you will get bored. Space them out between dungeons, and if you're so inclined you can look online to see which deliveries don't interest you. Not all force gems are created equal and lead to hidden stations, some just lead to rabbits or minor track connections that are not all that valuable. Like Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks features only 7 item slots, but this time only 3 are returning items, and there are no prizes for guessing which 3. The rest are brand new. The first item we get is the Spirit Flute, which is played by physically blowing into the DS system while dragging the stylus to hit different notes. It is a novel and fun feeling to play a video game instrument in such a way, but I wish it were more consistent. Playing the notes can sometimes get choppy, and finding the right combination of where and how hard to blow just sometimes feels impossible. This has been true of every console that I've played this game on, the DS, 3DS, and Wii U. On the Wii U, I eventually discovered that it is more reliable to blow slightly above the microphone onto the screen itself. Luckily, I figured this out before the final duet during the Malladus fight, because if this had taken me 10 attempts like the Fire Sage one had, then I would have been very annoyed. Placing a Spirit Flute duet smack in the middle of the final boss was certainly a choice. I mean, it's a great moment and I really like it, but it's the inconsistency of playing the flute that bothers me. If this takes more than a couple attempts, then it could just kill the inertia of the entire finale. If you ask me, there should have been an option to play the Spirit Flute without the microphone. Maybe you could drag upward on the flute to make Link blow and lower it when you need to skip a note. But hoping for options in a Nintendo game is like hoping for intelligence in an American voter. New songs to learn for the Spirit Flute include the Song of Discovery, which easily replaces that stupid-ass shovel from the last game, a song that gives you a full heal in dungeons, which I proceeded to forget about almost immediately, and my favorite, a song to summon cuckoos and birds that can carry you up ledges and across gaps. In the Forest Temple we are given the Whirlwind, which is also controlled by blowing onto the screen, but at least this time it's just one blow and doesn't cause issues. It creates a gust of wind like the Deku Leaf, but with super fast control over the direction. I wouldn't think too much of this item if the puzzles incorporating it weren't good, but they are excellent and span the entire game. Puzzles in Spirit Tracks are so back, and we are actually permitted to solve them again. There is no hint stone next to every puzzle telling you how to solve it. Instead, some of the puzzles in Spirit Tracks are downright challenging, and more than once I had to stop and think for several minutes, even though I've played this game several times before already. The Forest Temple is a passable dungeon, but extremely short, even by first dungeon standards. The next dungeon is the Snow Temple, which is far superior and really the first glimpse of how good a dungeon in this DS format could be. The boomerang just continues to impress me. It was always my favorite item growing up, and in Zelda 1 and A Link to the Past I kept it equipped as default. It got progressively better in Oracle of Seasons, Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and now this one. The puzzles here are unbelievably smart and creative, and the boss of the Snow Temple is fantastic. I'd easily call this the best boomerang in the series. The next dungeon is the Ocean Temple, which we have to go beneath the sea to enter. It is my least favorite dungeon in the game and the most disappointing water dungeon in the series, and that is for one simple reason. They forgot to put any fucking water in it!
There is water at the bottom of the ocean!
No, I'm sorry, David Byrne, there's not. There's not water at the bottom of the ocean, apparently. How can there be water flowing underground when there's not even water flowing underwater? I don't know what they were thinking. In both this game and the previous one, Link is unable to swim, which is weird, but even Phantom Hourglass had a dungeon with a changing the water level puzzle. You can still have water-based puzzles that don't involve swimming in it, but instead the puzzles in this dungeon involve... I don't know, there isn't really a theme to these puzzles, and it also reuses the same music track from the last two temples. It's as if a Phantom Hourglass dungeon escaped from that game. Well, not really. I do still enjoy the dungeon because it provides us with Spirit Track's best item, the whip. It functions both as a quick-release grappling hook, letting you swing across multiple bars, and also as a combat item. Remember when I tried pulling the shield off of the enemy using the grappling hook? Well look, that works now. Certain objects will stick to the whip and then you can fling them off in another direction, which is used both in puzzles and in combat. It can also instantly retrieve enemy drops and can be used to cling onto birds and flying propellers. The whip is so useful that it can even trivialize the fight against Cole and Malladus. The previous game didn't feature any optional items, but Spirit Tracks has one, and it's a surprising one. Bombs, for the first time in the series, are not ever required to pick up. I'm not quite sure why they're optional. I mean, who's not going to be picking them up? They're bombs. What kind of Zelda game would it be without them? Well, unfortunately, what this means is that there are no new bomb puzzles, which is disappointing, but they remain as useful in combat as they were in the last game. As does the bow, which is the next item found in the Fire Temple. There is also an upgrade in the form of the Bow of Light, which can be charged to shoot a light arrow like in Minish Cap, but this one is actually useful with a piercing effect that can strike multiple enemies. The bow puzzles that I want to highlight involve these devices that redirect the arrow into the direction it is pointing. They were found in the last game, but are way more cleverly utilized in this one, since they are now able to be picked up and moved. Some of my favorite puzzles in the game involve positioning multiple arrow shooters in certain spots facing certain directions, and it always feels so satisfying to solve. The Fire Temple is an excellent dungeon, probably my favorite of the 5 temples and greatly aided by actually having a new music track. The boss is incredible too. All of them are. Both of the DS Zeldas just nail it with their boss fights. Hint stones are not as prevalent as they were before, but still exist, and this dungeon features the strangest one I've ever seen. It says, "Remember, the only way to open this door is with a key." I obviously thought this was like a riddle, and maybe the key was metaphorical or otherwise something you would not expect. But no, you just find a normal key and open the door, and I'm left completely bewildered. Another hint stone in this dungeon reads, "Carry the boss key by cart," and I read that and was like, oh wow, thanks, I never would have thought of that. I then proceeded to jump into the minecart without the key and arrived at the boss door an empty-handed asshole, so maybe I really did need the hint after all. Puzzles that involve writing hints on the map also return, but are way less overbearing in their frequency. Instead of being what feels like every other puzzle, it is now more like 1 out of every 20. And for the most part, they are every bit as uninspired as the ones in Phantom Hourglass, and the vast majority of the time I just wouldn't write anything down. There was a part where you have to find a shape that these statues are making with their gazes, and I drew 3 lines of the shape and then called it a day. Like, okay, I get the gist of it. Once again, my favorite of these puzzles is the Anauki one, where this time you have to talk to all the villagers to figure out who should partner up with whom. The final dungeon is the Sand Temple, where we find a brand new item that is used to raise sand. It is such a simple concept, but Spirit Tracks pushes it to its absolute limit, and then further still. Some of these sand puzzles just blow my mind with their ingenuity. It's extremely amusing to me that Spirit Tracks even does sand better than Phantom Hourglass. There is an enemy that is defeated with the sand wand. I wasn't planning on talking about it until I read this entry in a Zelda wiki that says, "Only after stimulating it with the sand wand will it stiffen," which I found pretty funny. Overall, the dungeon set in Spirit Tracks is solid, but I nevertheless find myself wanting more from them. I still really dislike the map mechanic. It is way too detailed and continues to trivialize a lot of the navigation. I wish the map was just found in a chest again, as well as a compass which could fill in all of these pre-installed details. At least then solving the dungeon would feel more earned. And puzzle box dungeons are basically a thing of the past at this point, but there is at least a return of some puzzles that span multiple rooms or floors, especially in the Tower of Spirits, which is where the majority of the game's best puzzles are found. The Tower of Spirits is the central dungeon of Spirit Tracks with entrances from all 4 overworld realms. It is similar to the Temple of the Ocean King in that it must be revisited 6 times, and the floors of the tower are patrolled by phantom enemies that can be hidden from in safe zones. This is where the similarities end. On each revisit, you ascend a staircase to reach a new section of the tower. Under normal circumstances, I would complain about having to run up this staircase every time, but when you've experienced the alternative of repeating the whole dungeon over again, running up the stairs past the sections you've already completed becomes cathartic.
We're going up, up, up,
Inside the tower, we encounter the gameplay reason for why Zelda's spirit is separated from her body. She is able to take control of the phantoms in order to assist in the puzzle solving. This mechanic is what makes the Tower of Spirits stand out against the other temples, as it completely alters the complexion of the dungeon and how it is solved. Zelda is able to be controlled and commanded to pick up items like arrow shooters, distract enemies, shield against obstacles, carry Link across lava pits, and a lot more. And this is all just in the base Phantom. On each revisit to the tower, a new Phantom type is introduced with a unique mechanic. The Flame Sword Phantom is able to light up dark areas and ignite torches, the Warp Phantom can teleport, and the Wrecker Phantom can destroy obstacles. All of the Phantoms must be utilized at various points for their specific strengths. Even the normal Phantom with no special abilities is utilized in one particular puzzle that took me upwards of half an hour to figure out, which I imagine is the longest I spent on a Zelda puzzle in probably 20 years. Nothing will ever top the puzzle that had me stumped for like a year when I was maybe 8, in Oracle of Ages on Crescent Island, where you have to move this plant in order for it to make a climbable vine appear. The puzzles in the Tower of Spirits are just out of this world. Aonuma said there was one particular guy that was brought in on the development staff who had a strength in puzzle design, and he specifically created many of the Tower of Spirits puzzles, and obviously they let him cook, so hats off to that man. I can't even articulate the level of quality found in these puzzles. They are unlike any other Zelda puzzles before, and yet at the same time they are so unmistakably Zelda. And it's such an immense relief that Spirit Tracks trusts the player to be able to solve these difficult puzzles instead of ruining all of them by providing you with the solutions. Every visit to the Tower of Spirits brings with it a fresh set of puzzles, not only from the new Phantom type, but also on each revisit you are equipped with your most recently acquired dungeon item, which we get to see recontextualized within the tower's co-op style challenges. Even the boss key mechanic that went strangely underutilized in the previous game finally gets some purpose, as the key is electrified and so Zelda must carry it while Link protects her from floor masters. There is one boss fight in the Tower of Spirits, and it has all the chaotic energy that you would expect from a burn performance. It's a fantastic boss fight in that it's not all that clear how you are to defeat him. I was kind of just winging it the whole time until something worked. It is the very last visit to the Tower of Spirits that pulls out all the stops, and we get to see the biggest macro-level puzzles from any 2D Zelda game since the Oracles. All of these final floors must be fully understood and each Phantom type chosen with perfect deliberation. It is a highlight not only among Spirit Tracks dungeons, but among all 2D Zelda dungeons.
That's how it's done.
Spirit Tracks feels like a writing of the ship after the train wreck that was... Hold on, I have this backward. Spirit Tracks is a writing of the train after the shipwreck that was Phantom Hourglass. We refer to this phenomenon as the pH balance because that game was so basic. I've said this already, but it bears repeating. I am so beyond happy that another DS Zelda was made because the whole idea of the control scheme was too fun to be wasted on just one bad game. And Spirit Tracks doesn't squander the opportunity in the slightest. Every concept introduced in the previous game is executed in a far more competent manner. But Spirit Tracks is more than just a better Phantom Hourglass. It's an excellent Zelda game that belongs in the discussion of the series' high points. It is a fully satisfying experience that leaves me wanting for almost nothing outside of minor nitpicks. For me, it lifts the franchise out of its 4-game lull that started with Four Swords Adventures, and for that I give it a ton of credit. We will have to wait and see as to whether this momentum continues.
Well, we've certainly learned a lot about trains today, haven't we? We've seen big trains, little trains, diesel trains, steam trains, passenger trains, and freight trains. But if you'd still like to learn more about trains, don't forget they have lots of great books with lots of great pictures at your local library. Or you can visit a museum for trains, like this one in Campo, California. Well, I can see by my special train watch here that it's about time for this engineer to make his next run. So until next time, all aboard!